Help support AMTV by becoming a patron, an AMTV staff member, and following us over on Twitter.
This is BBC One in the South East. Now the news at 10 o'clock with Michael Burke and Mike Embley.
A 100-mile-an-hour rail crash has killed 4 people, injured dozens more.
They make it all seem so simple. In the world of TV, we as audience members are more used to everything running just exactly as it should. Programmes go out as scheduled, transitions between them are handled well, and news bulletins are delivered with a precision and ease that make the whole operation appear as a well-oiled machine. Most of the time.
Headlines this morning, Tuesday, the 24th of September.
MPs return to wherever it is today.
To share in the Severn Valley where thousands of acres.
Why have we got them? Don't change the bloody thing.
But maintaining television on the air, particularly back in the days of analogue, was an exceptionally difficult task. Numerous things could often and would go wrong, forcing programmes to be interrupted or taken off the air entirely.
Well, I'm sorry, Star Trek seems to have disappeared into space for just a moment. In the meantime, a little music and we'll hope to rejoin the programme just as soon as we possibly can.
For the BBC, in the year 2000, an event would occur one summer day that would see the corporation's television channels and radio stations be wiped clean from the airwaves, without a moment's notice. As the world began to embrace the new millennium, the 21st century offered untold advancements for the world of broadcasting, and for television in particular. In the late 90s, efforts were already being made to introduce and prepare the UK for what would eventually be heralded as the digital switchover, where analogue TV, which had been a mainstay for decades, would be phased out to make way for a new, more reliable, more effective means of delivering television. This wouldn't happen completely until late 2012, mind you, and 12 years prior, the majority of audiences still consumed their telly through a good old CRT with a 4:3 aspect ratio. The 20th of June 2000 was proceeding to be a day like any other for those in the BBC newsrooms at Television Centre. The day's main stories were being meticulously studied and covered by the on-screen presenters. One of them was Hugh Edwards, and I'm sure we're all more than aware of what's been going on with him in recent years, but for the sake of history, the clips will be presented here as they were back then. Sometime before the 6 o'clock news, the BBC began to experience its first serious troubles in regards to power. Fire alarms being set off around Television Centre, and near all of the staff being evacuated. Only a small team were allowed to remain to provide essential services, such as the news. As the 6 o'clock news begins, the prime time for such bulletins, Edwards informs audiences that the BBC have been experiencing some severe power problems, with even a chance that things may take a turn for the worst.
Now, before I press on, another apology for the rather gloomy lighting. We've got severe power problems here in West London, so if I disappear from your screens, you'll know why.
Despite the ominous warning, all seems to have proceeded as normal to begin with. A report was shown covering the Euro 2000 football tournament, and the hooliganism displayed by English fans. Honestly, nothing changes. During this report, the picture suddenly cuts out, leaving nothing but a black screen. No sound, no sight. BBC One had gone dark. Why had this happened? Well, it turns out that the main generator did give out, but all is not lost, as a backup generator, situated at Television Centre, would kick in.
Crews were called as the BBC's own backup generator burst into flames.
The backup generator caught fire. Honestly, you can't make this stuff up. With operations at Television Centre now extremely limited to non-existent, action had to be taken fast. Control of BBC One and later BBC Two was switched to Birmingham, and regional news programmes were forced to start earlier than scheduled. Afterwards, repeats would be shown, such as an episode of Dad's Army, to try and buy time, and to get the schedules and the channels themselves back on track.
We've got more correspondence than anybody else.
Energy, patience, time, knowledge of the subject.
People want to be told what's going on in their world.
This is BBC News 24. I'm Gavin Esler.
BBC News 24, the still then relatively new 24-hour news channel, was completely off the air. No repeats, no regional opt-out. For those who could access it, they'd be treated to simply a black screen. After nearly an hour and a half of nothing, just as News 24 aimed to start back up again, things went down. This time, however, a widescreen version of the test card, known as Test Card W, was thrown up on screen. However, instead of music accompaniment, a caption was placed over it. But I must admit, as someone with visual impairment, it's quite tricky to read.
Taxation.
In the end, an already recorded bulletin was played out to viewers, a last-ditched effort whilst attempts to stabilise were still underway. At around 9 PM, nearly 3 hours since the initial outage, News 24 decides to broadcast the feed from BBC World, the corporation's free-to-air news service that broadcasts around Europe. Eventually, a new live bulletin begins, now based at the BBC studios in Westminster.
This is BBC News. Hello, I'm Gavin Esler. We're broadcasting from our Westminster studios because of power problems in and around BBC Television Centre in West London.
At 10 PM, a new news bulletin is broadcast on BBC One and News 24 respectively, again from the Westminster studio. And after all of the initial chaos, by midnight, scheduled programmes across all the major channels were finally back in order again. Well, you can imagine what a frantic few hours that would have been for all involved. As I mentioned before, technical difficulties are nothing new in the world of television. Even nowadays, they may be rarer, but they still can and do happen from time to time.
US politics now on BBC One and hopes for healing a deeply divided nation. Well, I'm sorry we're having a problem bringing you Panorama tonight. We'll try and get it to you as soon as we possibly can.
But for a power outage on this scale to occur, one that took out the BBC's operations in such a quick manner, you can only imagine how devastating this must have been to the teams at Television Centre. Whilst backup plans were in place, showing repeats, simulcasting off other channels' feeds, etc., you know that the first priority would have been to get things back up and running as intended, particularly the live news bulletins, especially crucial for News 24. But don't worry, for those who wanted to follow England's big Euro 2000 match against Romania, they'd find that coverage to be unaffected.
This is BBC One, and as I've mentioned, I'm sorry to say that we've been having power problems here at Television Centre in London, so we're running a few minutes early, but it does mean we can soak up even more of the atmosphere on England's big night in Charleroi in Euro 2000 as we join Gary Lineker.
England lost that game. Go figure. The issue was eventually tracked to a power substation in Shepherd's Bush, meaning not only were the BBC affected, but so were around 20,000 homes and shops in the area. I guess it goes to show that, like I said, getting television on air and maintaining it can be more difficult than you think, especially when your backup generator explodes. Like, honestly, I can't get over that. How? Whilst frustrating and embarrassing for the BBC, once restored, these such troubles would be behind them. Until the very next year. It wasn't a power cut per se, but it was a disruption of a different kind. How about an actual high explosive bomb being detonated outside of Television Centre? What is going on?
The BBC's television newsroom is evacuated after the police carry out a major anti-terrorism operation.
In the early hours of March the 4th, 2001, anyone in or near the vicinity of the Television Centre would have seen this enormous explosion take place. A bomb had been found in a taxi, parked just metres away from Television Centre itself. Thanks to a coded warning that had been received around an hour prior, staff at the BBC were evacuated, either out of or to a part of the TV Centre complex that was away from the front entrance on Wood Lane. The bomb itself was found to be the work of the group The Real IRA, who carried out a number of bombings in the UK throughout 2001.
From a given moment in the show, we were expecting to fall off air, as we say, simply because we were warned that the generator was having problems and that it might just pack up for good. And when that happened, it happened during a report, and it just went, and there was a huge fizzle in the studio. The lights just disappeared with a big bang, and we were left there sitting in glorious isolation in complete darkness, from 6 million viewers to none in 1 second. It was quite an experience.
It's fair to say that the BBC has gone through its fair share of dangerous situations, whether they be technical difficulties or from actual, very real threats. These moments stand out within television history. We can only be thankful that in these two instances we've covered today, that no one was killed. But the 2000 incident in particular shows us that no matter how well oiled the machine may be, there's always a slim chance that your operations can disappear in the blink of an eye.
Bypasses Belgian border controls to...
This is BBC News 24. I'm Louise Minchin.
And I'm Chris Eakin. Yes, good morning to you. It is News 24. We've been off air for a while, as you may have noticed, due to the electricity problems which hit West London and hit much of the BBC's service overnight. Our apologies for that. News 24's equipment was particularly badly hit by various surges in power and so on overnight. There's been much fiddling of fuses and so on, and we are now back on air, thanks to Michael and Sophie for covering for us. But for now, we are back on air. Well, the darkness here has been much in keeping with the night of disappointment and despair for England. Fans have been...
Thank you to our patrons for helping to support the show, and a special thank you to Macra, Shaun Knock, Dord Khan, Ethan Carberry-Holt, Liam Demain, AJ Mac 200017, Deck, Jen, Traffy, Evan Hart 41, Tim Ripley, Mr. Eurovision 1986, Marnano Thurman, John Wakefield, Kieran Bolton, 40-something Manchild, Jerry Ralph, John McLeod, Saint Rocket 9, James Wallace, Ben, Kat Hegarty, Stephen Oliver, Tegan, Shadow Fiend 180X, Liam Wigley, and Swan Ronson, our AMTV staff members.